Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. It's the ins and outs of 1099s. My name is Renee Daggett, and I am your host for this webinar. Let me get my cursor going here. Who is Admin Books? All of you kind of know who we are. We are a fabulous team that helps our clients with bookkeeping, payroll, and taxes. I do have on the call with me our bookkeeping manager, Nikki, wave Nikki, and then our tax manager, Sabrina. They join us on every webinar here to support you, answer any questions that you might have at the end of this presentation. My disclaimer is this webinar is for educational purposes only. Please consult your tax professional for your specific situation. Many of you, we help you on taxes. Some of you, we only help you on bookkeeping. So, definitely consult a professional who's handling your specific situation. There will be an opportunity at the end of this webinar to ask us anything, whether it's about the topic at hand, topics from prior webinars, or anything else that you have going here. So that will be available at the end. Our agenda for today, I'm going to be talking about classifying workers, what deems somebody as an employee, what deems somebody as an independent contractor, and the differences there, so you are very clear on what that looks like. I'm going to go through kind of a 1099 and what the rules are on who gets it, how much, when, where, why, how. And then I want to talk about how the IRS views 1099s and contractor statuses, and specifically in audit situations that I've represented clients on. What does the IRS specifically look for as far as deeming workers as independent contractors versus employees? And then I want to share with you a new Supreme Court ruling that just came out this year for the state of California and educate you on what that says and tell you all the fun that wraps around that one. So let me tell you, let's start off about classifying workers. So many businesses misclassify their workers, and the IRS will be very strict, as well as the state will look very closely at how you are classifying the workers on your tax return. So let me talk about some basic rules. Now, employees work for an organization. They're typically paid hourly or salary. They usually will fill out a time card, and the employer controls the work that is done. The employee does qualify for unemployment. Contrastly, an independent contractor serves the general public and offers their services to the general public. They will have a business license. Sometimes they'll have a contractor's license, or for my field, I have an enrolled agent license. There's some type of professional service there. They are usually hired by companies by signing a contract and submitting invoices. But what I want to talk about is behavior control, meaning does the employer, does the company control the worker's time? Does the company tell the worker, you need to show up from 9 to 5, or this is how you do your job, when the work is done and how the work is done? Usually the employer will train the employee on what work needs to be done. For a contractor, the organization that hires that independent contractor does not tell the contractor when the work will be done or how the work will be done. So that's something that's very important. In fact, if you have if you have an independent contractor, you cannot train them on how to do the work. So if you're training your contractors, you're kind of going to get in trouble and by misclassifying them, because they're not in a true definition of a contractor, because you're training them. The second thing there is financial control. who is at risk if they don't get paid. For example, if I have an employee and I don't pay them, the labor board is going to come after me. EDD is going to come after me if I don't pay them. But if I don't pay a contractor, which would be ethically wrong, and I'm a woman of integrity, so I'm going to pay them. But if a business doesn't pay the contractor is at risk of not getting paid. For example, if they didn't do the work right, or there's some risk there. So there's that financial control of who has that risk. The other thing is a relationship control. What is the relationship like, and is that worker eligible for employee benefits? If they're eligible for like retirement and PTO, obviously they're going to be an employee. They can't be a contractor. Now there is a form called an SS8, and I have this on my other screen, but I'm going to bring it over. And since everybody else is muted, and I don't know if Sabrina or Nikki are, but I'm going to make this bigger here. Can you see this SS8 showing on the GoToMeeting? Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me actually, I'm going to make this bigger so it'll be easier to read. So you can fill out this SS8 form so that you can submit it to the IRS, and the IRS will help determine if your worker is an employee or an independent contractor. I have never filled out this form and submitted it. However, if you and your business are worried about classifying a worker wrong, pull up this form. The questions in this form will give you a better understanding of the IRS's position of an independent contractor or employee. So let me kind of scroll down past the general information here. So the first section is says part 2, and it says behavior control. So some of the questions that they're asking is, what specific training and or instruction is the worker given by the firm? Aha! This is trying to determine behavior control and who dictates how the work is done. Second question, how does the worker receive work assignments? Who determines the method by which the assignments are performed? Who is the worker required to contact if problems or complaints arise? And who is responsible for the resolution? What types of reports are required? Describe the worker's daily routine. At what locations does the worker perform services? Describe any meetings the worker is required to attend and penalties for not attending. Is the worker required to provide services personally? If substitutes or helpers are needed, who hires them? And it just kind of goes on from there. Now, then it goes to financial control. So it lists or asks you to list out the supplies, equipment, materials that are needed, and who provides that, the firm, the worker, or another party. So again, who provides the equipment? If the firm is providing the equipment, it's probably an employee situation. But if the worker is providing the equipment, it could be an independent contractor position. However, the state of California allows firms to have employees provide their own equipment as long as they earn double the minimum wage. So as you can see, it's kind of a tangled web there. There are exceptions to the rule, but it kind of goes on for financial control. What expenses are incurred? Does the worker lease equipment? What are some expenses that are paid by the firm, paid by another party? How is the worker compensated? So it wants to know who's at financial risk, question number 9 there. And then it talks about the relationship. You know, does the worker get paid time off, sick pay, holiday pay, bonuses? So if you look at this form, this is really going to dictate what kind of questions they're looking for, and if that worker needs to be an employee or can be a contractor. And I want to tell you a quick story. I know I have a client that is actually a general contractor. He hired a plumber, which is an independent contractor. He paid the independent contractor or paid a fee for his services, and gave the plumber a 1099 every January. Now, this was quite a few years ago when the economy was rough. Well, this plumber didn't have enough work. So this plumber went to the state of California and filed for unemployment, which then triggered an audit. And so what happened was the state of California went to my client, the general contractor, and said, hey, is this your employee? And he said, no, he's not an employee. I give him a 1099. He invoices me. I even get a copy of his business license every year, because I'll talk about that in a moment. Well, what was interesting is the state of California said, well, let me back up one step. The plumber got a business license every year. That business license started with July 1st and ended with the end of June. And so what the state of California did in this situation was they decided that they were going to deem all the wages paid to the plumber the first part of the year when they had a license as an independent contractor. But the second half of the year, they're going to deem them as an employee. The reason why is that the plumber did not renew his business license. And my client didn't get a copy of that business license until it kind of expired, right? And thus, because he didn't have a business license, the state of California deemed the second half of the year as employee wages, and my client had to pay penalties and employer taxes on that money. So not only did he classify the worker correctly, but he didn't have a watchful eye on the business license and kind of defaulted on that and then had to pay penalties on it. So make sure you keep track of all of that. Now, the IRS does have something that they call a volunteer classification program, where they say you can correctly classify a worker and change them if needed. My recommendation to you is that if you've been paying somebody as an independent contractor for the 2018 year, in fact, as this recording is December 2018, and they really should be an employee, I highly recommend that you set up payroll as of January 1 and get them paid as an employee going forward, so that you're not in that situation having to pay not only employer payroll taxes, but penalties for not doing the right thing. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is who gets a 1099. So here are the general rules. If you pay a vendor $600 or more in a calendar year, you need to give them a 1099. Now, the money that you pay them needs to be for services. It is not for materials or products, anything tangible. It is strictly services. And it is when you pay them a check or cash. Now, if I pay a vendor with a credit card, that credit card payment is going to go to my vendor on their merchant account. Now, if I pay them with a credit card, I do not include that in the 1099 amount, because they're already going to get a 1099K from their merchant showing the income that I paid them with the credit card. So be watchful that any 1099 that is generated is for checks or cash only. In fact, QuickBooks does a great job on this. So if you're not in QuickBooks, get in QuickBooks. Now, who is required to get a 1099? Now, if you are a corporation, if your vendor is a corporation, an S Corp or a C Corp, you do not give them a 1099. They are exempt. Let me say that again. S Corps and C Corps are exempt from getting 1099s. But if your vendor is an LLC, a partnership, or sole proprietorship, you must give them a 1099 if you pay them the $600 services, checks or cash, for the calendar year. Now, attorneys are a different breed. All attorneys are required to get a 1099 regardless of their entity. And the form that you fill out is a 1099 miscellaneous, where you report the amount that you paid in box 7. Now, this form is due on January 31st. I want to switch gears here and talk about what does the IRS need in order to prove a contractor status. So when you have a contractor and you kind of know the rules, know who's doing the training, know that they dictate when the work is done and how the work is done, you're going to have that independent contractor sign a contract. So you're going to have a contract in place, and the independent contractor is going to invoice you for the services rendered. You're going to have them fill out a W-9. So this indicates if they're a corporation, S Corp, C Corp, a partnership, or individual sole proprietorship. That way you know to give them a 1099 or not. But I've been representing clients in audits where it's very interesting the things that the auditor will ask for. One auditor asked me in a situation that had contractors. They said, I want to see the website for the contractor. I'm like, okay. They asked for business cards from the contractor, because remember, the contractor provides services to the public. So one would think it would be prudent that if you provide services to the public, you would have a website, you would have business cards. And so this auditor asked for those items. So keep in mind that those are kind of things that they're going to look for. They also might ask for a business license. I had a friend of mine, I didn't do her taxes. She had a sole proprietorship business, and she lived in San Jose, California. And what happened was the city of San Jose mailed her a letter saying, hey, we see that you've had a business for the last 3 years because the IRS shared your Schedule C information. And we don't see that you paid for a business license for the city of San Jose. Therefore, here is a bill for the last 3 years to pay for a business license. Now, the city of San Jose at that time charged $150 a year. So as you can imagine, she was surprised, not happy, grumpy, sad in receiving that letter. So that's one thing that you need to have as a business owner. You need to have a business license. And so that's one thing that the IRS will look for. Another quick story, I had a client where they had workers that they deemed as independent contractors. I spoke to them about the, what is an employee and what is a contractor. And we agreed that the worker really was an employee. And so I explained to them the consequences for deeming the worker wrong, and I encouraged them to classify them correctly. Shortly after that, the firm was audited, and there were questions about the independent contractors versus the employees. And it was something that the business owner said that he was willing to risk for the audit. And then what ended up happening is he ended up paying about $11,000 in employer taxes for misclassifying the worker. So just be aware that the IRS, and I will actually say the state of California, is more ruthless than the IRS. They're more, I've just seen them very much trying to get every nickel to the state of California. So know the rules and do the right thing. The last thing I want to talk about is the new rule for the state of California. Let me tell you about the court ruling. So there is a company called Dynamix. Dynamix is similar to like UPS or FedEx. They have drivers that deliver packages. And in 2004, Dynamix, or prior to 2004, Dynamix had all of their drivers deemed as employees. But something switched, and they decided in 2004 that they were going to deem all the drivers as independent contractors. The drivers did not like that, and so they filed a class action suit where it went to the Supreme Court of California. The Supreme Court of California in April of 2018 deemed that those workers really are employees. And they came up with an ABC test. And I'm not going to go through all of the details of the ABC test, but what you need to know is the B portion of this test basically says that if any of your workers does the core part of your business, in this case, delivering packages, then they are deemed as an employee. Let me give you an example. So if you are an HR consulting firm and you hire professionals to help you do the HR consulting, because those consultants do the core part of your business, meaning the consulting in the HR industry, they need to be deemed as employees. They cannot be deemed as independent contractors. Now, recently, Employment Development Department, EDD, verbally had some comments to make about this. While they stated verbally that they will not change the way they're doing business in auditing due to the Dynamix court ruling, they actually have not put anything in writing on what they're going to do or not do. So the first thing that I want to do is bring to your attention this ruling. I'm not seeing it in the media. I'm not seeing it in print, on TV. You know, I'm not seeing it in social media. I want to bring this to your attention of this court ruling. Because it's new, we don't have any court cases on other people other than the Dynamix situation. And I actually went and had a group sitting with an employment attorney back in July this year, because it's very concerning, you know, of how this is going to affect the state of California, how it's going to affect the Uber and Lyft industry, how it's going to affect my clients that are deeming their workers as independent contractors due to this situation. They may not be able to afford to switch them to an employee, because when you switch them to an employee, not only do you have to pay the employer taxes, but then it also affects workers' comp as well. So in that group setting with that attorney, one person there said, you know what, if I switch my independent contractors to employees, she goes, I'm going to, you know, I can't run my business. I'm going to have to close my business. What the attorney said is that you really, well, first of all, I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving you advice. Seek counsel from your attorney. This attorney basically said it's an assessment of risk. If you have one independent contractor in the state of California, you know, what are the chances of them going to EDD to file unemployment? Have a conversation with your worker or workers. Most independent contractors want to be deemed as an independent contractor. They're working for other entities. It's a benefit to them because they can write off their deductions. They don't want to be an employee. So having that conversation with them is a big piece of it. What's going to happen on this decision in the next upcoming months or years, I don't know, but I just wanted to educate you on what's going on there. Because tax professionals are humorous, I wanted to throw this cartoon in there. It says, get me the W-9 now and nobody gets hurt. So I just think that's pretty funny, and hopefully that put a smile on your face. I'm going to pause for a moment here. I mentioned I have Nikki and Sabrina on the line. I have asked them to share a 1099 story or two, something short, to kind of give you some examples, maybe answer some of your questions that you might have. Nikki, I'm going to have you go first, and you and I were talking about a situation, which is a great example here. And then Sabrina, if you could share a story, and then we'll end the webinar and also answer your questions. So if you have some questions, be prepared for that when Sabrina is done. So Nikki, take us away.
Well, I am definitely the bulldog, not the coyote in the cartoon, because I'm the one who is attacking the clients to get me the W-9 so I can get your 1099s filed on time. We did have a situation with a client where she was making payments to contractors and then getting reimbursed from another client for the work that the vendor had done. And she's like, so this is just a reimbursable expense. I don't need to 1099 that contractor. And I said, different point than I have ever heard, but I did look at the IRS instructions, and she is responsible for 1099ing those contractors because the payment came from her, not from their mutual client. So if you are in that type of a situation, you definitely need to make sure that you stay compliant. Something else that I learned most recently is a lot of 1099 services are now giving you the options to email your 1099s to your client before an actual mailed 1099 goes out, but you have to have the vendor's permission to send that information by email. So just be aware that if you have someone fill out a W-9 and ask them to include their email address, it does save a lot of time and effort on the people who are preparing those 1099s. But you do have to have permission from the vendor to send it to that email address.
Great, thanks for sharing, Nikki. How about you, Sabrina?
Yeah, so this actually recently came up regarding, we actually had a client get a notice from the IRS saying that they owed a whole bunch of tax. And what had happened was they had a business that was previously a sole proprietor business that they had converted to an S corporation. And lo and behold, they kept receiving the 1099s under their old sole proprietor EIN or their own SSN in some cases. And so IRS thought they had additional income that they hadn't reported because they didn't know it was part of that flow through S corporation income. And so I guess, that's just kind of a cautionary tale of whichever side of it you're on. If you are in that situation where you've converted to an S corporation, make sure that you let people that have made payments to you know that, and also kind of just again on the other side of it, just making sure that you are keeping on top of that if any changes happen to anyone you're making payments to. So that's just kind of a cautionary thing there that we're still actually working through resolving with the IRS. So, and I just think one other item that I have, this isn't a specific thing, but I know it's been asked of me a couple of times of, what to do if you need to issue a 1099 and you can't get the W-9 filled out and you can't get an SSN. What IRS says about that is that, you want to make sure that you're still being compliant. So you definitely still want to file one and kind of have that SSN box blank. And then what will happen is they'll send a notice back to you that you will then in turn send to that contractor along with a backup withholding notice and a W-9, basically trying to nudge them and say, if you do not do this, you'll be subject to a penalty and you'll be subject to withholding on any future payment. So just again, kind of an FYI there because I've been asked that a few times.
Oh, I love that story. We get that question a lot, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to make sure all of you know, whether you're listening live or on the recording, make sure that you're getting our newsletter. We do talk about like the Dynamics ruling. In January, we're going to give some specific tips on 1099s. And so that's something that we love to educate our clients and let them know about. We also have our business Facebook page where we post tips as well. If you are not aware of the tax reform rules, we did 3 separate recordings. One's for individuals, one's for businesses, and then one specifically on the 20% deduction for the tax reform changes for 2018. You can go to our website. I put the link there, but it's under taxes on our website, and you just enter your name and you can listen to the recording on demand right there. So make sure you take a look at that. For those of you that we do payroll for, you may not know that we can do your tax projection, and those of you that we do bookkeeping for, maybe you want to add our payroll services. So we like to be that one-stop shop for businesses to bring value to them between bookkeeping, payroll, and taxes. For those of you that are not aware, we did webinars regarding home office deductions and how to read and understand financial statements. If either of those topics are of interest to you, email us and we can give you the recording to listen to. I am doing an upcoming webinar. This will be the last one before tax season. I'm doing it Thursday, January 24th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. I'm going to talk about goal setting in a business. And as a business owner, when I started my business 15, 16 years ago, I had no idea how to goal set. And it's only been in the last probably 7, 8 years that I've been doing it on a regular basis. I've read a book called Traction, which is a great book on goal setting. I have people that I sit on a board, a CEO board, that we meet monthly and we report our goals. So I have some accountability there. And it has actually been really great to have that in figuring out what my goals are for my business. If this is something that you've been wanting to do just to get some ideas, we're going to do a webinar and I'm going to share with you what I do in a simple way. This is our contact information. Contact us if you have questions, concerns, needs help. Love to connect with you and have a conversation. So this is a time that I just want to open it up to you guys. You can unmute yourself. Ask us anything. You have questions about 1099s, home office, anything that's going on. Would love to hear from you. And state your name and then your question, if you could, please.
Hi, Renee. This is Patty Nation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Recently stepping into the role of consulting, and I have a client who I will get my W-9 to them. We're still just in the conversation phase, working out the NDA, framing the job and the scope, so no payment transactions yet. However, they also have another contractor who will be getting a 1099, and we'll be collaborating on some of the work, going back and forth. Is that ever looked at by the IRS? Is that person reporting to me? Because I don't pay them, I don't provide equipment. We meet, we collaborate, we brainstorm, but I didn't write their job description or anything like that. How does that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you have a contract with your client, and this other 1099 contractor probably has a contract with that same client. And you're probably getting paid for your portion, which you're going to include, your price will include collaborating with this other person. So you will not need to pay them a 1099. Your client will pay them a 1099 because that's who they're giving money to. Since the money is not since your client is not paying you for the collaboration you're doing with that other person and you're not paying them, they are a separate business from you and you will not be required to give them a 1099.
Perfect, because we are a great team and collaborating. We have different strengths, but the two areas that we're researching will ultimately dovetail to give the client the information they need, but that person isn't reporting to me. I'm not paying them anything, so great answer. Thank you.
It can be very confusing. I think the thing that will make it clear is just to ask yourself to follow the money. They always say follow the money, right? If you are paying somebody you need to give them a 1099. If your client is paying you, your client needs to give you a 1099. So just kind of follow the money. If there's no money trail, there's no 1099.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, this is Catherine Risala.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi. So I have someone that makes birthday cards for my clients. She has, you were talking about business card. She has a business card. She offers her services elsewhere around Morgan Hill. I'm not sure if she has a website or not. My guess is no. I do give her, you know, and I update my client list and provide that to her with birth dates and client addresses. But she's making the business cards, you know, at her own home, in her own time. She mails them for me. I don't dictate anything else to her other than, you know, the list of clients. I don't believe, no, I've never paid her over $600 for the year in making those cards. So am I correct in that she's okay to still be kind of doing that work for me on a contracted basis?
Based on everything you told me, Catherine, yes, I would deem her as a contractor. What I would recommend that you do is, first of all, my question is, does she invoice you for the cards that she makes?
Yes.
And then the second thing that I would do is ask her for a copy of her business license. It's $21, $23 in Morgan Hill. It's really cheap.
Okay.
That is in case you go over that $600 amount. It's just to protect you. But since you don't pay her more than $600, you know, there's no 1099 to do. But just in case you get audited and somebody asks, you know, who is this person? Nikki probably has some great ideas as well. You're muted.
Sorry. I don't know that I would even deem that expense as a subcontractor. I would be deeming that as an office expense, because she is providing a goods, not just a service.
Yeah, and I'm thinking now as you're saying that, I believe in my QuickBooks, you know, I classify it as marketing.
Well, marketing can be a service as well, and that is a good place to classify it. But because she is providing you with a product and not just, if you were giving her all of the materials and asking her to make the product and you were providing her with the envelopes and the stamps to do the mailing, that would be a service. But if she's providing all of the materials, she's providing you a product. So that would not be something that you would 1099.
Okay. Even if I pay her above the 600, which I don't anticipate ever doing, but you never know. Okay, and then I've got another question.
Sure, fire away.
Okay, so I have a college student that comes and, you know, she's at college to be, you know, a speech and language pathologist. So, but she basically comes and is doing some admin work for me, filing, making activities, etc., etc. She also helps me with a social group that I run. I currently have her as an independent contractor, but listening to you now, she is definitely should be classified as an employee. However, you know, I'm paying her, I believe I'm paying her pretty much minimum wage at this time. So I doubt that she will exceed the $600. She may. I haven't done the math yet. But it sounds from what you've said that $600 figure is almost irrelevant, because she still should be classified the right way.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I would just have a conversation with her and just say, as of January 1, we're going to, you know, pay you as an employee, and you're going to get a W-2 at the end of the year. And there's going to be taxes taken out. And I mean, you still can pay her the minimum wage and be mindful of what that is, you know, for our area, and kind of just have that conversation with her.
Okay.
Excuse me. Any other
Thank you.
questions? Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Catherine.
Yes.
And you can ask a question that doesn't pertain to 1099s. That's fine too. But I'm not going to have you guys stare at us on the webcam and just wait for a question. So I just want to thank you guys for joining us. And I'll pause for one more moment. Anybody else want to raise their hand and ask a question? Sounds good. Thank you guys for joining us on this webinar. Hope you can join us on the next one for goal setting. And if you want to get recordings on the other 2 webinars we've done recently, just shoot us an email. We'd be glad to share that with you. Have a good evening. Enjoy the weekend ahead. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Renee.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.